The British media really picked a fascinating week to accidentally prove Prince Harry right again. Because while Prince Harry's Travelist Coalition is being recognized in the business world, with actual professionals and actual industry people acknowledging real work and sustainability innovation, another article quietly slides into mainstream media discussing Prince William's temper and how it reportedly terrifies King Charles. You cannot script irony this beautifully. Somewhere inside Kensington Palace, a communications aide probably stared at those two headlines side by side and briefly considered a career in goat farming. Let's be serious for a second. These two trajectories are not even comparable anymore. Prince Harry is way above. No debate. On one side, Travelist shortlisted for Business Travel Award Europe 2026 in the category of Business Travel Achievement and Sustainability Innovation. On the other, William's temper reportedly terrifies his father. One brother is attached to innovation, global partnerships, sustainability models, and collaboration with Google. The other is attached to sources say he's angry again. And this is exactly why the palace machinery has spent years trying to discredit Harry, because the more time passes, the more uncomfortable the comparisons become. Now, let's talk about the first story, because this is actually significant and not just another fluffy royal headline written by somebody clutching a teacup while whispering about duty. Prince Harry's Travelist Coalition has officially been shortlisted for a Business Travel Award Europe 2026 in the category of Business Travel Achievement in Sustainability Innovation. That is not a fan award. That is not a popularity contest. That is not most photogenic royal near a tree. This is industry recognition. The travel impact model, developed by Google in collaboration with Travelist, is being recognized for helping make travel sustainability information more accessible and transparent. In simple terms, the project helps travelers understand the environmental impact of flights and travel choices, which is real work. Notice how different this is from the nonsense Harry and Meghan critics predicted when the couple left royal life. Remember that? They swore Harry would fail. They swore Meghan ruined him. They swore nobody would take him seriously. They said he would spend the rest of his life begging for relevance. Meanwhile, Harry is partnering with global companies, leading conversations around sustainability, mental health, veterans, technology, conservation, and ethical travel. And somehow the tabloids still talk about him like he's hiding under a bridge stealing Wi-Fi from Buckingham Palace. The funniest thing about Travelist is that people mocked it simply because Harry was attached to it. That was the entire criticism. Not the actual concept, not the partnerships, not the goals, just Harry bad. That was the intellectual depth. British tabloids would literally report Prince Harry launches sustainability initiative, and then the comment sections would respond, but he flew on a plane once. As though environmental advocates are supposed to teleport through spiritual enlightenment. Humanity truly is committed to misunderstanding environmental policy with Olympic-level confidence. But now, here comes industry recognition. Now, here comes validation. Now, suddenly, this project everybody mocked is being acknowledged in a serious business setting. That matters because it shifts Harry further away from the celebrity royal box critics desperately try to trap him inside. This is executive-level work, corporate-level partnerships, global collaboration, innovation recognition. The same people screaming that Harry does nothing are now watching his initiatives gain credibility outside royal gossip circles. And that is terrifying to the establishment narrative because Harry succeeding outside the monarchy destroys one of the institution's favorite myths, that royals can only survive inside the palace system. Harry keeps disproving that. Not perfectly, not flawlessly, but consistently. And meanwhile, what keeps leaking out about the palace itself? Chaos, briefings, power struggles, temper stories, control issues, petty rivalry narratives. Which brings us beautifully into this InStyle article. Now, pay attention to this carefully, because this is where things become deeply awkward for royal commentators. The article discusses claims that Prince William's temper reportedly terrifies King Charles. Not Twitter, not YouTube gossip, not random blogs. Mainstream media. And what is especially interesting is that the article references Prince Harry's memoir, Spare, where Harry talked openly about William's temper and their physical altercation. Remember how the media reacted when Spare came out? They treated Harry like he had detonated the monarchy with a flamethrower. Liar, traitor, delusional, jealous. They practically wanted him exiled to the moon. But slowly, piece by piece, other stories keep emerging that quietly support parts of Harry's account. That's the part nobody wants to discuss, because once multiple reports from multiple directions start describing William as volatile, angry, or intimidating, people naturally start revisiting Harry's version of events, and suddenly the palace strategy of painting Harry as unstable becomes harder to maintain. The British press spent years selling William as the stable future king and Harry as the emotional, reckless spare. But now, the image management is cracking, because image management can only hold for so long when stories keep leaking. And let's be honest here, nobody would even blink at these stories if Harry had never spoken. That's what makes the palace so angry. Harry disrupted the illusion. Before Harry, royal reporting worked like this. William equals perfect, Harry equals naughty, Charles equals wise, everything equals fine. Now, audiences question everything. Now, when stories emerge about William's temper, people connect dots. Now, people remember the interviews, the body language, the tension, the visible resentment. And suddenly, the monarchy doesn't feel like a polished fairy tale anymore. It feels like a deeply tense corporation wearing crowns. The institution hates that shift because monarchy depends heavily on mystique. Once the public starts seeing these people as emotionally messy power players having family conflicts and PR wars, the magic weakens. And Harry existing outside the system keeps contributing to that, because Harry leaving created contrast, a very uncomfortable contrast. Think about it. Harry and Meghan moved to California and built independent projects. They signed deals, created Archwell initiatives, produced documentaries, built media partnerships, launched campaigns, supported Invictus, expanded Travelist, raised children away from palace culture. Meanwhile, the palace press cycle remains trapped in endless loops. Who's angry? Who ignored who? Who snubbed who? Who looked annoyed at a balcony? Who allegedly shouted at staff? At some point, even casual audiences start noticing the difference in energy. One side looks future-focused, the other side looks emotionally constipated under chandeliers. And the UK tabloids hate when Harry achieves something measurable, because measurable success is difficult to spin. It's easier to attack Meghan's jam. It's easier to obsess over Instagram posts. It's easier to scream about Netflix. But an award shortlist? That creates problems. Because now critics have to explain why a supposedly irrelevant prince keeps ending up in respected international spaces. And this is why they constantly move the goalposts. First, Harry will fail. Then, okay, he didn't fail, but nobody respects him. Then, okay, some people respect him, but he's hypocritical. Then, okay, the project is recognized, but we still personally dislike him. At least they're committed to cardio from all the narrative backpedaling. And can we talk about how exhausting the royal rota must be at this point? Every time Harry succeeds, they have to pretend it means nothing while simultaneously writing 47 articles about it. If Harry was truly irrelevant, British tabloids would collapse from boredom because they would lose 70% of their daily content. The monarchy's media ecosystem is weirdly dependent on the people they claim not to care about. It's like a toxic ex refreshing your Instagram while insisting they've moved on spiritually. And this William Temper story also highlights another issue the palace can't fully suppress anymore: fear culture. Because whenever stories repeatedly emerge about someone's temper, staff treatment, intimidation, or explosive behavior, audiences naturally begin wondering how palace environments actually function behind closed doors, especially after years of reports involving staff tensions across multiple royal households. The institution always wants the public to imagine calm dignity, but increasingly the stories sound like corporate dysfunction with tiaras. And honestly, this is where Harry's popularity with younger audiences makes sense. People under 40 are generally less interested in preserving fairy tale optics. They care more about emotional honesty, mental health conversations, transparency, and authenticity. Harry speaking openly about conflict, therapy, trauma, grief, and family dysfunction resonates with people because modern audiences recognize those experiences. The old royal model was never complain, never explain, which mostly translates into suppress everything until someone explodes emotionally in a documentary 20 years later. Harry broke that formula, and the establishment still hasn't recovered from it. Now, does that mean Harry is perfect? Obviously not. No human being is. No human being is. But perfection was never the point. The point is that Harry stepped outside an institution built on silence and hierarchy and still managed to build influential projects afterward. That matters, especially because critics predicted total collapse. And Meghan deserves enormous credit here, too, because let's be real, the British media blamed that woman for absolutely everything. Bad weather? Meghan. Harry eating avocado toast? Meghan. Economic downturn? Possibly Meghan breathing near a candle. The hysteria became genuinely ridiculous. Yet, despite years of hostility, Harry and Meghan continue building independent ventures internationally. And every success irritates people who wanted them punished. That's the real truth underneath all this outrage. Some people never wanted Harry and Meghan to thrive independently because their independence challenges the monarchy's control structure. The palace system functions best when former members struggle outside it. Harry succeeding disrupts that narrative. A short-listed sustainability innovation project may seem small to casual viewers, but symbolically, it's huge. Because it says, Harry is not just surviving outside the institution, he is building. And building internationally. That's difficult to dismiss, especially when the comparisons keep writing themselves. One brother associated with innovation awards, the other associated with terrifying his father. And before anyone screams that media reports can't always be trusted, remember something important. The royal press spent decades asking audiences to trust unnamed palace sources whenever those stories benefited the monarchy. They cannot suddenly become skeptical about anonymous sourcing now that the headlines feel inconvenient. That's not how this works. You don't get to spend years weaponizing insider leaks against Meghan and Harry and then suddenly cry about privacy when stories emerge about William. The media ecosystem created this monster. Now it has turned around and started biting everybody, which honestly feels karmically efficient. And another thing. This idea that William's temper allegedly intimidates Charles says a lot about palace dynamics, because Charles himself has long faced stories about frustration, impatience, and outbursts.
So when articles suggest even Charles finds William intimidating, people naturally wonder just how intense things get behind palace walls. This is the future king, the carefully protected heir, the man presented for years as the calm, responsible statesman. Yet increasingly, the reporting surrounding him feels tense, brittle, and defensive. And again, Harry warned people the palace environment was deeply unhealthy. People mocked him for it. Now, mainstream publications keep circling back to the same themes: control, anger, power struggles, fear, image management. At some point, the pattern becomes difficult to ignore. And notice something else. Harry's major stories increasingly revolve around work: Invictus, mental health, technology ethics, travel sustainability. William's biggest viral moments lately? Usually awkward PR optics or palace drama. That's not entirely his fault. The monarchy itself is struggling to modernize in a world where inherited status impresses people less and less. Younger generations increasingly ask, what exactly do these people do? Harry's projects at least provide tangible answers.
That's why travelist recognition matters, because it demonstrates measurable engagement with global issues beyond ribbon-cutting ceremonies and carefully staged photo ops. And honestly, sustainability innovation is exactly the kind of future-focused work royals should theoretically be leading. Harry simply ended up doing it outside palace control, which must sting because the institution spent years trying to frame him as reckless and unserious. Yet, here we are. A serious business award shortlist, collaboration with Google, global sustainability tools. Meanwhile, royal reporters are still writing, William looked annoyed during event. Human civilization truly peaked when we invented billion-dollar media ecosystems dedicated to analyzing rich people's facial expressions. And this is why Harry and Meghan remain such a lightning rod. Not because they're irrelevant, because they challenge the hierarchy emotionally, culturally, and commercially. They left, survived, built independently, retained influence. That combination deeply unsettles institutions built on obedience, especially hereditary institutions. The palace expected Harry to either crawl back or collapse publicly. Instead, he created an entirely different ecosystem around himself. That's why every achievement gets downplayed so aggressively, and every mistake gets amplified like a global emergency. But audiences are noticing the imbalance more now. They see how Harry and Meghan are scrutinized differently. They see how palace narratives shift constantly. They see how stories that once sounded unbelievable slowly gain supporting evidence over time. And that changes public perception. Not overnight, but steadily, which is probably the most frustrating outcome imaginable for royal strategists, because the monarchy survives through long-term image cultivation. And right now, the contrast between Harry's trajectory and palace dysfunction keeps becoming more pronounced. One side looks modern, collaborative, internationally connected. The other side increasingly looks trapped in emotional rigidity and endless PR firefighting. And honestly, that's the biggest irony of all. Harry was always portrayed as the problem prince, but increasingly he looks like the one who escaped the problem. Meanwhile, the institution he left behind keeps leaking stories that sound less like royal majesty and more like HBO succession drama with antique furniture. At this point, Buckingham Palace should just install confession booths and hire documentary crews permanently. It would save everybody time. Because every few months, another article emerges confirming that behind the polished ceremonies and choreographed smiles exists a deeply strained family system held together by protocol, press management, and very expensive tailoring. And through it all, Harry keeps moving forward. That is what truly irritates his critics. Not failure, success. Quiet, persistent,
undeniable success outside the palace gates. Thank you for tuning in, and I will see you in the next video. Am Smiley, and take care.